Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. So said the late Nelson Mandela, a statement that nicely captures the theme of today's episode. The intersection, some might even say the collision of AI and education. Hey there and welcome to the AI Forecast. I'm your host, Paul Muller. Join me along with leading companies and industry experts as we explore the past, the present and the future of data and AI in the enterprise every week. And if you haven't already, quick reminder, make sure to like, share and subscribe. We really do appreciate your support. And speaking of support, a huge thank you to the show's sponsor, Cloudera, for bringing us another episode of the podcast. Well, with that, on to today's episode. So the role of technology in education, at least to my eyes, has always been a contentious one, whether it was the introduction of the slide rule, the calculator, or laptop computers. Technology has been equally hailed as either the accelerator of greatness or the enabler of the cheats and the lazy. So to discuss this and more, we're joined by Marlee Strawn. Marlee is the co-founder and head of education at Scholar Education, an AI-powered edtech platform, and has nearly 20 years' experience in and around the education sector. Welcome to the podcast, Marlee.
Thank you so much for having me. And I couldn't agree more. I've seen exactly what you just described, a lot of contention around the adoption of technology in general.
Well, let's get into that in just a minute. But before we do, we like to start off with the Furious Four, the Fast Four, the lightning round. Call it what you will, but it's a way to get to know you through a slightly different lens. Are you ready to play the game?
I'm ready. For sure.
You say that with trepidation. I'm into it. All right. First question, Marlee. What would people who know you best say is your superpower?
I think people would say that I have the ability to see the whole picture and how it impacts things. So I think that traditionally when you're a leader, you are either like a visionary or an executor. And I have the ability to see the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, but then all of the very detailed tasks.
It's almost like you're from central casting when it comes to a startup. You need that capability in spades. All right. So next question, it's a difficult one for most of our guests. What is the most impactful technology of all time?
I would say the internet democratized information, but now AI is democratizing how we access and understand that information. So I would argue that the internet was really what moved the ability to have access to information, and now we're going to be able to not only access but understand that in new ways.
Next up, we always talk about AI, what it's going to do for, we're going to talk about the education sector, but, for medicine, for legal, for everything else. But what would you like to see AI automate for you personally, Marlee? Like, this is your chance to get your perfect product. What would you like to see out there?
For me, it's the automation of just research that helps me make decisions. I would say that research, and especially when you're running a company and you're trying to make decisions quickly, having the ability to have an automated report of all of the latest insights, specifically with AI and the trends in AI, has been really helpful.
Last but not least, we all have, I like to think we've all got either a conscious or unconscious competence when it comes to working with data, things that make us successful when it comes to working with data. What are some of the best practices or hacks that you've learned as someone who works with data on a daily basis?
So I think that a lot of times when you're looking at data, we miss the opportunity to look at the context of that data as well. So context really matters when you're working with data, especially in the classroom. Like you can look at two different classrooms and they could essentially be teaching the same content, same curriculum, but there's so many different variables that will impact that data set.
I think that's a great advice. And I was just smiling to myself because I think to myself, a lot of the context probably can be made parametric. It can be data. So the answer is that the solution to working with data is to get more data.
Yeah, that is funny when you look at it like that.
Which works for everybody. All right, well that's great. Thanks for joining us through that the Fast Four. Let's get onto the topic of education. But before we do, let's talk a bit about your background. Have you always been an educator? What's your story?
I am a lifelong educator. Started as a high school history teacher, in fact, and then I moved my way through school administration, became an assistant principal, and then most recently, before starting Scholar Education, I was the founding principal of a high school. So I helped build that school from the ground up, which was a really unique opportunity. It is actually the top performing charter high school in the seventh largest district in the nation. Really a unique school centered around project based learning. So having that opportunity to kind of sit in all those different types of seats, I bring all of that to Scholar Education as, the co-founder and head of education, because I've sat on the other side of the table of evaluating technologies. I've seen an evolution of technology, I would say, that has been pretty transformative. Bringing all of that, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one of the things that I completely agree with is that, one of the fears around education with AI is like cheating, right? But kids have been cheating for years. The calculator helped them cheat, the internet helped them cheat, the cell phone helped them cheat.
I love it. I once heard a story of a student, their parents had been moving around Australia from state to state as part of, as their parents or their father, I think, had been promoted through various levels of running various departments of this company. And every time he would move, which was once every 2 years or so, he would resubmit the same essay. So didn't even need technology for that. He just would just pull out the old one from the previous year and hand it to the teacher and go, this is my homework. So you don't need to, as to your point, if there's
a will, yes. If there's a will, there's a way. Yes.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you a little bit about it later, but we'll talk about it now. So from that standpoint, how much do you, when you think about the introduction and evolution of technology in the classroom, on balance, and I'm talking longitudinally here, 20 plus years, this can be an opinion as much as it can be backed by evidence. Is your thought, benign, negative, net positive, or to be determined? Where would you place technology?
I definitely think it's to be determined. We are so early days, and just not only it's just the access to AI, right? Generative AI has kind of taken over the category of AI, but we've been using different versions of AI, whether it be machine learning or whatnot, in the school setting in different ways. But now the whole narrative is centered around what we kind of define as AI. General AI is what we use now, generative AI. So we're so early days in AI in general as impacts on every industry. We also can probably agree that education is one of the last industries to innovate. Very slow moving, lots of bureaucracy involved traditionally. I would say that AI has forced education to innovate faster than we've ever seen, faster than any other technology has. But when I have conversations with schools, I see everything from early adopters who have policies and are already piloting tools to banning AI in general. So we're seeing a huge gap between adoption. We're also seeing that not only from school to school, but we're also seeing that from teachers to students. About 86% of students are saying they're using AI in some way, and then only about 30 to 40% of teachers are saying that they're using it. So there's a gap there as well. So I think it's really hard to say what the true impact of AI is going to be. And I think that goes along with my mission at Scholar Education a lot. We are piloting with teachers to co-design everything that we've created, because we know that this, not only are we using technology, a new type of technology, we have to teach the teachers to leverage this new type of technology so that they can make an impact. That takes time, right? So we're not going to really know the impact of what the best use case. I have my predictions, of course, but we're not going to really know the best use case and how it's going to impact and where it's going to impact education probably for until the next few years. We're just so early days, and like I said, huge adoption gaps, early adopters, and then some who are still avoiding it like the plague.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have heard a story of someone say, well, one of the novelties of being a teacher these days, you always had a bright kid in the classroom who'd disagree with you about something, but you can be up there on the blackboard, the whiteboard, or whatever it is, talking about a particular topic. Let's just say history, and one of the kids who's got their smartphone pipes up in the room and says, "Hey Miss, hey Mister, Sir, according to Google or Wikipedia or whatever, the actual thing, the actual situation was different." Is that something you've experienced personally? I mean, what's it like being a teacher in an environment where the kids arguably not themselves natively, but because of all this technology around, could be smarter than you, presenting alternative thoughts or facts? It must be a challenging environment.
Yeah, and I think that's where the fear comes. You're making me think of a story of my first year teaching, obviously before access to all of the smartphone in general. But
You're aging yourself here, Marlee. I'm just letting you know that.
I know. But I had a kid. I mean, I was basically like a chapter ahead of my students, right? I had just graduated. I barely knew all the things I was teaching. And I had a student who was brilliant. And every time she raised her hand, I cringed, like my body tense, because I knew she was going to ask me a question that I might not know the answer to. And my go-to answer was like, you're ahead of us. We're going to get to that soon. So to your point, like that makes me think of that experience, and then that student probably actually knowing the answer to that question potentially when raising their hand. So I totally get it. As a teacher, I understand that the there's fear around how is this going to impact not only just like my workflow, the types of lessons that I assigned, something that I might have to revamp the way I've been teaching for 20 years, right? I have teachers who have been teaching for 20 plus years. So I understand, but I also feel that overwhelmingly educators are really resourceful, and they're very good at problem solving. I would say that's one of the superpowers of every teacher, is being a problem solver. I think what every school leader's challenge is, and now I'm kind of pivoting to my teacher or my principal hat, is providing teachers with the resources and the tools and the supports so that they understand how the technology works themselves, so that they can kind of combat all of the challenges that they're having or thinking, right? Because 9 times out of 10, when I talk to a teacher, they have their guard up at first, but once I just show them how powerful it is, how quickly they can generate new ideas for lessons or analyze data to support their students, the fear really gets dismantled, because they see, okay, this is just another tool that I have access to support my students in new ways. It's helping take off some of the most challenging tasks off their plate so that they can focus on why every teacher gets into the classroom, which is their face-to-face time with the kids, which is, if you talk to pretty much any teacher, they'll say that's what keeps being put on the back burner, is the things they enjoy, that face-to-face time, those moments with the students that make a difference, because they have so many administrative tasks that are really taking up their time.
I think a really great reminder is, and a quick public service announcement or acknowledgement, just to say, thank you to all the teachers out there, because you are often not paid as much as you should be, considering the role you play in enabling the next generation of workers, of leaders. It is I think, under-acknowledged part of society. So a big thank you from me, at least anyway. Let's talk about AI in the context of, because I guess AI, I can imagine, is applied really differently, or could be experienced really differently, for a pre-university student, in their sort of final year of high school or college. I imagine it being applied very differently to what it might be, say, talking to a kindergarten student. Is there much difference, or is there a sort of an area of applicability where it's like, well, AI really doesn't make sense to talk about until you're talking to, a junior in high school? Talk to me about the spread from, say, K-12.
We have students that are using our platform from K-12. And I have a 6-year-old who just finished kindergarten who uses BaxterBot, our student tutor. And so I could argue that the earlier the better that you get them started, because to be honest with you, the young guys, my son included, are AI native. They're growing up in a world where they don't know any different. My son has talked to Alexa, he plays music. If he watches YouTube, he's getting recommendations. These are all forms of AI that they're immersed with. So this, generative AI technology like Scholar Education, where they have this AI tutor that they can interact with, this is their new normal. This is how they are going to be raised. So I would say that AI literacy and talking to students as early as K is very important because then they can understand how the technology works. I think it's really simple in the kindergarten age. And again, I have a 6-year-old, so we have these types of conversations. It could be AI tools could be mistaken for real humans, right? So
Mhm.
you want to get ahead of that. You want to explain, like, what is an example of a real human interaction versus an AI interaction, and that having those general conversations about different types of technologies make a lot of sense as early as kindergarten. And I think because they're AI natives and they're immersed in the world anyway, the quicker we can educate them and have conversations around it, the better it will be in the long run. The high schoolers, actually, I feel like they have a bigger challenge because they know a world before generative AI and they know a world with generative AI. And so they think to themselves, oh, this is just a really cool tool to help me do my homework, or this is a really cool tool to, create something for me. So it's even more important to them to put boundaries and have transparent literacy skills with them so that they know when it's applicable to use AI and when it's not. I think that's where we can make a mistake in schools as well. I was the principal when they started cheating with ChatGPT. Well, I didn't have a policy around AI in my school because it wasn't a thing that we had to deal with. So we had to pivot, right? So we had to come together as a staff and evaluate what is the use case. This is a technology that's powerful. When is it acceptable for them to use it? When isn't? I don't think it's fair for us as adults. I think most adults are using AI tools like ChatGPT or Copilot in their workflow to some degree. Even my mom, who I never thought in a million years would be using AI, is using it for things like coming up with recipes, right? So there's so many like different ways that adults are using it. I don't think it's fair for us to expect that students aren't using it, but I do think that boundaries, transparency, and policy has to play a big role. Just avoiding it is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, I'm sure you have heard about some of the stories where there's school districts being sued because a student was failed because they used ChatGPT, and the parents are saying, well, we didn't know that was plagiarism. It almost seems silly when you say it out loud because, of course, it seems like logical that that would be considered plagiarism. But you have to understand we're dealing with high schoolers who their brains are not fully developed, right? They don't have the ability to know exactly what makes logical assumptions in regard to plagiarism. To answer the question, K-12, the earlier you start, the better because it just builds. And these students are AI natives, and we have a responsibility to prepare them for the world that they're going to be working in one day.
So let's talk about. I've got to ask the question. You mentioned Baxter before, and for those of you listening who haven't had a chance to check out your website yet, explain the two dogs. There are two dogs. So explain the dogs. It was cute, but also slightly what?
Yes, yes. So our platform is centered around personalized learning, which means that every student gets a unique experience when they interact with BaxterBot. So our platform is centered around two AI assistants, a teacher assistant and a student assistant. The teacher assistant is Professor Bruce. He's going to help with like lesson planning and the student data analytics. And then BaxterBot is the student-facing tutor. So he knows what the lesson plan is that day, but he knows their learning profiles. The reason why we used dogs as our avatars, my co-founder has two Bernedoodles, Bruce and Baxter. And we knew that AI was going to be a scary concept. So we thought, why not give these two assistants fun, lovable personalities? I would say most people love dogs. In fact, we wanted them to be like a fun mascot. We bring them to the schools. The kids and the teachers love them. It's a way for us to kind of engage this generative AI technology in a fun way We also, though, wanted to make it clear that this isn't a human, right? We wanted it to be clear that this is a tech tool. So that's part of the reason why we use that personality.
Yeah, I love it. It's distinctive. It's cute. But to your point, I was going to ask the question. You know, we often talk on the show about the importance of examining the ethical side of deployment of AI in the governance function. What we don't often talk about is the psychological side of things. And I suppose when you're dealing with, K-level students whose social brains are still forming as much as their cognitive functions, the risk of anthropomorphizing an AI, we've all seen the movie Her, right? And, developing an unhealthy relationship with technology is a challenge. Have you talked to much about? Sorry, have you talked to many psychologists about how to deploy this technology in different ways as people age?
I wouldn't say psychologists necessarily, but I will say I was very aware of that concern from the very beginning, as an educator. So what we did, I mean, from the very first deployment in our very first classroom is we have built-in guardrails. So what that means is we monitor every conversation, right? And then we built in like flags for moderation. So anything from like a social emotional concern. So if a student express any sort of distress to Baxterbot, the teacher gets an automatic flag, an automatic email. Anything from obviously like things like cheating, we have notifications for too. We wanted there to be a lot of teacher transparency and school transparency because we knew that that would be a concern. But then we wanted to take it to the next level where we automate some of the concerns or the flagging of any concerns. So we have those built-in guardrails. I think that's one of the things that makes our product unique is that the teacher doesn't have to go hunt for concerns. We bring those to them. So like, if I said to Baxter, I want to beat up my brother, the teacher is going to get a notification that Marlee is being violent today. So we have considered that. And again, I think to your point, we're very early days, right? Just like we didn't know the impact of cell phones on kids, and now we're learning more. We're going to learn more, but I think that because we know more about the impact of cell phones, we as technologists and people who are in the education setting and have seen the impacts firsthand, we can be more proactive than we technologists were before. In fact, when I created my school back in 2019, I banned cell phones. Now states are banning cell phones, but because I saw back in 2019 how cell phones were impacting kids on a daily basis. So I think that in general, in the world of ed tech, we're more aware of the concerns. So we're being more proactive about guardrails and concerns.
Just a question for you as you think about AI broadly now, where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI to give us uplift in the education space?
The narrative around AI in every industry is usually centered around efficiency, right? Being faster, quicker, even better at pretty much every task. And I think we could argue that's a no-brainer at this point, right? I have always seen AI in education less as a teacher efficiency tool and more about giving teachers to use your word earlier, the superpower of making sense of data in ways that they had never been able to before. So I see the best use case for AI as providing data insights to teachers that maybe they didn't have time to unveil themselves. Maybe they didn't have, I mean, we're not data scientists. We go to school to be a teacher, not to be a data scientist. Maybe they didn't have the skills to unveil so that we can actually meet students exactly where they are. So we've been talking about personalized learning for the last 10, 15 years, and a lot of technology has made strides to work toward that. I feel that with generative AI and the ability to provide insights to teachers about individual student performance, we're now truly going to be able to provide that personalized learning for every student, where every student's learning experience is tailored to their need.
Which is revolutionary. It's hard to overstate, when you think about the public school system, we're talking hundreds of millions of billions of students, I guess, if you think about the planet's population. I imagine, never having been a teacher formally, but having taught technology classes to adults, trying to keep up with the huge disparity in a classroom is one of the most difficult tasks I personally would face. Is just someone gets it, someone doesn't, and you're not sure whether to focus on the person who gets it to move forward or focus on the person who doesn't and keep everyone else from achieving their full potential. So the ability to do that at scale is, I mean, it's literally a game changer. We've never been able to do it before.
Over the last 5 years, particularly after COVID, the classroom has become increasingly diverse, right? The classroom needs are even more challenging, and there's more of a variety of needs in your classroom. And we're seeing that impact the teacher's workload. So that I 100% agree with you that every teacher would argue that you don't know what to do. Do you teach to the top? Do you teach to the bottom? Do you teach to the middle? Who gets left behind, right? Now we have the ability to really to provide teachers with the tools to meet kids where they're at. And that's where I think is going to be the true game changer. We're still early days. Can't deny that. I can't say that a magic wand happened and everything's fixed. But I do see that that is now possible, where before November of 22, I wouldn't have said the same.
I love it. So let's just talk, everyone loves a bit of a horror story, let's be honest. But seriously, I think, if we can learn from others' mistakes, it's great. We can avoid making them ourselves. Where in your experience so far, and to your point, we're early days, but where do schools tend to go wrong when they start thinking about, or maybe districts, regulators, where do they go wrong when they think about implementing AI, in your opinion?
I would actually argue that it's not just an AI problem, it's actually a technology problem in general, but it's when you adopt technology without policy to support it. So what I mean by that is, what I've seen is schools are purchasing a platform, right? Purchasing an AI tool, or purchasing or piloting something, but then they haven't provided the training or the literacy or the support for the students and teachers. So what can happen, and I've seen it a lot of times with just technology in general, it go like the technology dies. Like they say, a huge percentage of licenses for technology in schools they go unused, right? It's the same thing. That's the problem with AI. The biggest challenge with AI, though, is, and I mentioned it earlier, is not only are you just teaching them how to use a new technology, like a new platform or a new app, you're teaching them to use a technology in a different way than they've ever done, right? Most people, prompt engineering is not natural to them. What's important for me as the founder of Scholar Education, when I partner with schools, I really look at it as like a collaborative effort where I'm teaching about how the technology works, because if you have that context and that knowledge of how it was built, then you can get more out of the tools in general, my tool or any other tool.
I'm going to ask you to crystal ball for a bit, if it's okay. Next, you mentioned the sort of the broad narrative surrounding AI, and there are a few themes, but one of the themes that seems most prevalent at the moment, and I think we talked about it on the last episode or second to last episode of the podcast, is the idea at the moment that the media seems to be leading with, and let's face it, it sells newspapers, whatever that is, Dad. But it sells newspapers, and that is the idea that AI is going to take your job. And, we hear it in the legal industry, we hear it in the creative and marketing industry, we hear it in so many of segments of the knowledge economy that AI is going to automate your job away. What do you think the future of education is? Because I guess we've been talking about disruption in education now for since the advent of the internet and Wikipedia. It's like education's dead. It's going to be replaced by e-learning. We don't need this, we don't need the public school system anymore. You're nodding, so obviously you've heard this stuff. 25, 30 years later, education seems to be stronger than ever. What's your take on the future of education in the face of AI?
Yeah. Well, I could say from running a school during COVID, we can all agree that in-person learning is best. So, that was a challenge for everyone. So I think we learned a lot from that. But that being said, I have two thoughts. Okay. First, I did a whole TED talk on this topic in general about teachers. I do not think, and I would be willing to argue it to the death, basically. I do not think that AI is ever going to replace teachers. And that's because when you get into a classroom, it is not about any technology that makes that classroom effective. It is about the relationships you have with your students. It's about recognizing, that Marlee's having a bad day today. It's about building those connections and motivating your students to try their best. You can't do that with any technology, AI or regardless. Okay. Now, do I think that AI, again, is another a really powerful technology that's going to allow teachers to do things that they were never able to do before faster, quicker, because we can do things like automate data analytics and providing lesson plans tailored to each individual kid? Absolutely. But I don't think that classroom, the teacher student relationship can ever be replaced by any technology. And that's really what the classroom is all about. Now, that being said, do I think that things will evolve? Yes. Do I think that we might see changes and maybe accountability, like when it comes to testing and things like that over time? I do see that there will be an evolution because this technology is going to change things in ways that I can't even predict. But I don't think that teachers will ever be replaced by AI in any capacity. I still think we're early days, and I think it's going to be a slow evolution, right? Where it's not going to be like tomorrow you're gone. I think we'll have the opportunity to evolve as well. So I have two answers to that. Teaching, I think there's a few jobs that aren't going to be completely replaced. Teaching is one of them. I would say doctors are another, right? Doctors are a great example. They've been using AI as a tool to help them diagnose patients for years, right? They haven't been completely replaced. All it's done is help them be more precise in their job. So I think that the media does a great job at hyping things up because that's their job, right? But I think that the reality is we've been dealing with all of these quote unquote concerns or issues anyway, and we've been working through it as a society.
I think that's an inspirational note on which to wrap up. Marlee, that was it was just great having you join us today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Congratulations on the launch of what I think is just a wonderful mission-oriented organisation. If people are interested in learning more about how to apply AI in the education sector or just in general, where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, our website is joinscholar.com. We have a free pilot coming up for this upcoming year, so you could just join our priority list there. And then we're very active on social media as well, which is also Join Scholar, all of them, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, all of the socials.
Fabulous stuff. Well, how very modern of you. I love it. All right. Well, with that, that's a wrap, folks. I'm curious. Do you think the classroom is ready for AI? Drop your thoughts into the comments section or hit us up on LinkedIn using the handle @Cloudera with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks again to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.